Darkness kills, destroys the will. Find a spark, make hearts thrill. Hear the tales of time so grim. Shine a light, don't let it dim. Heather Brown downtown, bound. True crime story she's found. In the shadows, secret state. Need a light that finds the way.
Welcome back to another episode of Defeating the Darkness, True Crime Stories with Downtown Heather Brown. That's me, your host. I'm a former sexual assault and homicide prosecutor in Orange County, California. And today I have with me an incredible man who I've known for many years. His name is Patrick Wall, and he is a former Catholic priest and monk. And he is going to tell you all about sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, what he knows, what he's uncovered, and what he's doing to make it stop. Welcome to the episode, Patrick Wall. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Heather.
I am so excited you're here with me. And more importantly, I want to thank you for coming here in the midst of probably one of your darkest times in your life.
Yeah.
Right?
It's been rough. I mean, thousands of us lost our homes in the January 7th fire.
Yeah. So you were one of those people who lived in the Palisades, and
I no longer live in the Palisades. And the thing that's so difficult is kind of being a refugee. We have no idea if or when we can ever go back.
Wow. That's unbelievable. I realized too, by listening to some of my episodes, I say wow a lot. So I'm going to try and switch up some different words. No, wow. I'll have to pay like $1 for every time I say that. It's better than some of the other words I say though. So you drove all the way from wherever you're staying, right? You're staying with family and friends?
In Calabasas, yeah.
Wow. So you came, I just said it. Look at me. I said wow again. Okay. Interesting. I'll use that one. You came all the way from Pacific Palisades here to join me to talk about something that I just find incredibly fascinating. And so I want to tell the listeners how it was that we met, because I actually love this story.
Mm-hmm.
You and I met, not at a bar.
Nope.
But I think we were having some wine at an event. It was like a fundraiser for, I was on the board of the Innocence Mission, which was a nonprofit, and they were having like a gala somewhere near Disneyland, if I remember correctly.
Yep, and a lot of clients were there. Yep.
And there were a lot of people there, and my husband, Tom, was actually sitting next to you, and the two of you started chitty-chatting.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, my husband turned to me and was like, you need to talk to this guy. And the reason he felt that was I was in the middle of coming up on a prosecution for a pervert, a molester, Father Dennis Lyons in the Catholic Church.
Infamous Diocese of Orange priest, yes.
Yes, an infamous priest who had actually previously been arrested and charged with sex crimes, and his case was dismissed because of a statute of limitations case.
Which is the oldest legal story we have to hear over and over again. Yep.
Yep. And so People versus Stogner, right, was the name of the case. And that case ruled that his crimes were outside of the statute of limitations for sex crimes. And so the DA's office had to dismiss the case, which was very unfortunate. And then fast forward, a new victim who was inside the statute of limitations had come forward. And I was going forward on this case against Father Lyons. And, for our listeners, it's hard to convict anybody, right? But, when you have to prove a case to 12 people beyond a reasonable doubt, but then when you throw in the fact that you're prosecuting a priest, someone who everybody reveres and thinks can do no wrong, and you and I know that simply is not the case. And it certainly wasn't the case in this one, because we had actually multiple people who had reported to the police and law enforcement that Father Dennis Lyons had been molesting them. And so back to us, though, I won't get into the nitty-gritty about that particular case, but you, at the time, were working as an expert witness against churches that cover up child sexual abuse. And my husband gleaned that from you at that conversation and said, you need to talk to her. And you and I forged our friendship at that moment, and we started talking, and you actually, pro bono, for free, came to help me and work on that case.
Yeah, because essentially I'm really good at discerning church documents, because that was my life. That's how I was trained. And all of that stuff that they had turned over, right? You were just being papered, literally, boxes of out of order stuff that with key things that were in there. But like in so many times I've seen over the decades that you have all these boxes, there's only a few pages that really matter. And when I was able to go through and put that little timeline together and to highlight some of those things, and then that's when I could see your lights go on, like, oh, we actually might prevail in this case.
Yes. And you were instrumental in helping me not just discern, like, what are these documents? What do these mean? Not just what documents do I have, but what documents am I missing?
Yes.
And more importantly, who are all of these people? And what you uncovered when you started looking at those documents was, to me, just downright shocking. I don't know if you even recall all the details, but
oh yeah, it's sitting there right in the files.
But
that the vicar generals and the vicars for clergy and the chancellors of the diocese were out cutting deals and interviewing various survivors, sending the priest perpetrator away to secret treatment facilities that are really well known now, right, in the whole process. But back then it was still fairly new that the average juror would have a hard time absorbing that. What do you mean they have their own psychiatric hospitals out in the middle of the desert somewhere, and in different locations, to ship them off? And then it from a prosecutor standpoint, it kind of erases the trail, which makes you really nervous, right? Because then you can't, as a great prosecutor, you can't tell the story in a very clean way, because you have all of these disjointed pieces.
yeah, and so having you was instrumental. So I actually do want to jump back to this story and the things that you uncovered in my case. But before we do that, I think it's really important for our listeners to kind of understand where you come from and how you know all these amazing things that you know. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pry, because
Yeah.
for our listeners, Patrick's been coming and teaching a class. I teach a class at Cal State Fullerton about sex crimes. And for 13 years, twice a year, because I teach 2 different semesters, you have been coming and taking time out of your personal life to come and educate my students and talk to them about sexual abuse in the churches and everything that you know. And so thank you for that, for starters. But every time you come to my class, I have to pry the beautiful, juicy details out of you about your own story. But that's the story I find the most fascinating. So let's tell that first to our listeners. And then, and I hope you don't mind if I interrupt and ask you a couple of key questions. And then we'll move back to how it was that you were instrumental in helping me with my case. All because my husband...
Tom asked the right questions.
Tom asked the right questions,
Yep.
and he was chitty-chatting with you at that event. And so, and that was rare that he would even go to those events with me. So thank you, Tom Brown. And thank you for talking to him, because we wouldn't be friends today. And I'm really thankful for that.
I could sense a very real person. And the reason I'm really good with people and have a sense of people is because I was trained as a Catholic priest and a Benedictine monk. And I was raised in a really warm, believe it or not, Roman Catholic Irish family. And so it was, I was raised in that culture. So everything I know is steeped in a deep church culture. And I was lucky enough to be, good in athletics in a very small town. And so I got to go to a small college, St. John's in Collegeville, Minnesota. And I got to play college level football for John Gagliardi. But I also got introduced to medieval monastic libraries and long learning. And so that's when I really got the religion bug and this deep desire for learning and the love of God, as Jean Leclerc would say. And the thing that's was so powerful is the monastic regime of 7 days a week, prayer in the morning, midday, and at noon, and mass every day. There's a horarium that happens, and there's a steeping of of spirituality that even to the hardest of heart comes into one. And I was so lucky to be raised in that, and
So when you're saying this, just because I'm kind of a dummy when it comes to all the big words that you're using, but when you say like the monastic, are you talking about a monastery?
Literally a monastery. One of the largest monasteries in North America is in northern Minnesota,
but you went to college, right? And was it a college?
The college run by the monastery.
Okay, so the monastery, which is the monks, and that's Catholic, right?
Correct.
They run and own this college. Mm-hmm. And is the purpose of the school, I mean, are there other degrees that you can get, or is it just to get a religious degree there?
Oh no, it's a full complement of liberal arts education. So there are kids there that are doing chemistry, that go on to be chemists, or doing biology, go on to be doctors, or they're doing physics and going on to be architects and engineers and things. And there are folks that study government and go on to be politicians, and just the whole complement of liberal education, which is the Benedictine philosophy, right? What
does Benedictine mean?
It's followers of Saint Benedict. So Benedict was one of the early guys who wrote a rule for how monasteries are to be organized, and it was a compilation of centuries of learning of different types of monasticism, and it's
What's the difference between a monastery and a church?
Church is like a local parish for the people of the area, whereas the monastery is set aside specifically for people to lead a religious life, male or female. So just a few miles down the road was the convent, the monastery of St. Benedict for women. And then they, not surprisingly, had a college. So today you would know it as the colleges of St. John's and St. Benedict in St. Joseph and Collegeville, Minnesota. And it's just a natural outgrowth of the monastic life that you would have schools. One of the famous things in the Rule of Benedict is describing a monastery as the school of the Lord's service. So that part of the whole spirituality is learning. Lectio Divina is so that classical learning and the maintenance of learning throughout the centuries is part of the spirituality of being a Benedictine monk. And I attribute that to my incredible research ability, because I was trained in multiple languages. I was trained in history. I was trained in philosophy to be able to take all of this together. I was trained in the history of science.
And that's during your stay at the college and learning all of that.
Yeah, and part of that. And also I had training in Rome. I had training in Jerusalem, which was mind-blowing at the time, in the 1980s. It was just an incredible education that I received.
And I know this just from speaking with you speak many languages.
Yeah, and more importantly, read. It's the ability to access the documents. It's the ability to access that learning that's more important.
How many languages can you read in?
7.
Oh.
But once you get into Latin, right, that opens up a whole nother world of
tell me what these
languages.
Tell me what these languages are. I'm blown away by the fact that you know 7 languages.
Well, it's important. Like yesterday, I was reading through the motu proprio from the Congregation of the Dicastery of Legislative Texts in Latin. So Rome has.
I don't even know what the first words you just said mean.
It's just a fancy Nancy way of saying that Rome has these different offices. They call them dicasteries.
Dicasteries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever. And then the legislative text would be like legislative council for up in Sacramento for running the legislature. You have a bunch of lawyers who actually work through the nitty gritty of the language, right?
Now you're talking my language, Pat.
Exactly. And so now and that's exactly what I do on a daily basis, is simply translate that culture to what we're doing, so that the average juror, the average prosecutor, the average sex crimes investigator can understand it and not get caught up in the veneer. Oh my God, that's a beautiful yellow. No, that's a flower. We need to recognize that as a flower, right? As a rose. And that's essentially what I do on a daily basis.
Wow. Okay, back to your story. So you're learning all of these languages, you're learning all of these subjects, you're getting training in Rome while you're in college. How old are you at that point?
I come back at the age of 26, right?
Okay. So
And
you started at what age?
Started at 21. Yeah.
And what'd you do up till you were 21?
I was in college. So I was a regular college kid. So technically I went to St. John's at 18. And then I guess novitiate started when I was 20. I was still 20.
Novitian, is that what you said?
Novitiate is just the novices, the beginners in monastic life.
Okay, so you go and get your 4-year degree. Mm-hmm. And what'd you get your degree in?
Philosophy.
Okay, so you
and
get
government.
a degree in philosophy, and then you go on to do additional studies, like a master's degree in theology.
Yeah, you do a year of novitiate, which is studying the Bible and studying all of the core monastic documents, Evagrius, and all of the various cool dudes from the early centuries. And then after that, you get a master's in divinity.
Divinity, okay.
Yeah, so it's 120 graduate credit hours, just like a PhD, ultimately, in theology. And then I also did canon law. But and then in the midst of all that
Is that a law degree in the laws of the Catholic Church?
Yes. And in the essentially the important piece of it is you are studying multiple different pieces of the theological tradition, and you're studying the liturgy, because eventually you're going to be ordained a priest.
And now what's the difference between a priest and a monk?
A monk is a person who's committed to a monastery, and his obedience is to his abbot and that community. Whereas a priest is a sacramental minister. Usually you know of diocesan priests, like down the street at the parish. That is a diocesan priest whose obedience is to the Bishop of Orange.
And the diocese?
Of Orange.
Okay.
So you're ordained for a specific diocese.
And you were both a monk and a priest?
Yep. And my obedience was to my abbot, who then eventually sent me to work in parishes. So religious order guys in parishes have 2 masters they have to report to.
I see.
Yep.
Okay. So take us back. You get your degree. Now you're getting your degree in
Yeah, I finish up all my degree work,
divinity.
and then I come back, and I thought I was simply going to be a college football coach and a professor and a monk living at St. John's. But what happened was that I got back in July, and that particular August, 13 child sexual abuse civil lawsuits were filed and made public. And at that point, chaos in the system starts to happen.
What year was this?
This is 91.
Okay.
And so all of these guys are completely removed from ministry. And that happened on a particular date. The next morning, the abbot, after morning prayer, came to my room, which he never ever did, and said I was going to be the faculty resident on Second Mary and to be helping out in the college. So I was immediately thrust into this because that monk had been removed for credible accusations of childhood sexual assault.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
you were to fill in for the pervert guy.
Yep.
All
And that changed the trajectory of my life forever.
Wow. Okay. I said wow again. But I'm always just fast. What's another word? You know 7 languages. Give me a better word than wow. Something that makes me sound more bougie.
Bougie, exquisite.
So
I don't know.
I don't know that I could pull
That's
that
too
one
much.
off.
No, we'll come up with
Okay.
more. We'll get a
Think about it.
lexicon as we go along here.
Perfect.
One of the things that was so unbelievably changing the color of my life, right? I mean, this was a nuclear bomb, literally, that went off, right? I am now in charge of 90 freshmen, and I also have begun my first investigation as to, are there survivors on that floor
Of that monk.
and what do they know? And then I report back to the monastery's lawyer, Father Dan Ward.
So I got the point that you were, basically his replacement, but were you also assigned to investigate him? And what, if anything, the people knew, or how was that playing out?
It's all It's understood in the culture, and then you're questioned as to what you know and what you're learning. So you're getting questioned by the dean of housing, you're getting questioned by the monastery's lawyer, right? And then the abbot just stays completely out of it because you always protect the king.
Gotcha.
Keep the king out of the direct loop.
And the king being the head of the abbot?
The head, yep.
All right. So you now are in charge of all these young people in college and...
Just like any other faculty resident at St. John's at that time, it was a really involved kind of thing, and it was fun. I loved it, right? Because it's your first chance to teach. It's your first chance to really go through all these years and what I thought was going to be my vocation.
And then what happens?
Then more lawsuits are filed. Then my ordination is ramped up, and I'm ordained in December so that I can go out to parishes to cover for another guy that got removed.
So now that you're being sent to parishes, you're ordained as a priest.
Yep. I'm ordained in December and then sent out by Christmas time. Yep. And then I ultimately never go back to St. John's because lawsuits keep getting filed and more stuff comes out. And the system is in literally chaos because they had it under control. They had it contained.
And then at some point you realize this is anything but contained.
Anything but contained. I was on the tribunal. I was working on cases. The head of the tribunal was removed because he was a perpetrator. The auxiliary bishop in my area was removed because he was a perpetrator. There were dozens of more monks that were removed because they had credible accusations of childhood sexual abuse. And what I thought was just a bunch of, a small group of rotten apples turned out to be the tree. The tree was rotten. And the tree was rotten through and through to multiple countries. I had been to other Canon Law Society of America meetings and, talking with guys that were working on the exact same cases in Canada and all over the United States. And then we had a training. An official from the Holy See came over. They were trying to streamline prosecutions. Sounds like a government thing, right? They want to have a nice streamlined prosecution system.
And you said Holy Seed?
See. So from Rome.
Oh.
SEE. Yeah.
The Holy See? What is that?
It's just the fancy Nancy name for the church apparatus. Yeah. So an official comes over from one of the dicasteries.
Another big word.
And in trying to teach us that are working on child abuse cases on how to put the case together before we send it over to Rome. And at that point, man, if you got someone coming in from the central offices, that means that it is so pervasive that they need to centralize it. And then that's when I start to put my monkhood up and do some serious research. If you follow the law, if you start with the current code of canon law, the current legal book, and you trace canon 1395.2 all the way back, it brings you to the 1st century of the Christian era. And I'm sitting there as a young monk. I'm 31, 32 years old by the time I put all this together. And I'm thinking, wow, 2,000 years of deep, serious knowledge of priests and religious sexually assaulting minors. And how did my mom and dad didn't know this. I don't think the average person
So
had
you're
any
saying
idea.
that within canon law, there's laws on the books from 2,000 years prior.
Oh, yeah. So 1395.2 takes you back to the 1917 code, which then, good legal research, right? Takes you back to the 1922 procedure, which then quotes specifically Sacramentum Penitentiae, back in the 18th century. And then it just keeps on going back.
And you traced it all the way back 2,000 years. So
To the
this is
Didache,
to
yep.
the Didache.
Which is a fancy Greek word for the teaching, the original catechism.
And that was before Jesus, right?
It's about the time of Christ, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
And so they've been doing this forever, basically.
Yeah, and so you start to shiver, right? And you think, what in the world did I join up for?
And how old are you at this point?
I'm 33 years old. And then at that point you have to logically think this through. Is anything going to change? I'm just gonna keep doing cleanup work after cleanup work after I didn't sign up to be a defense lawyer.
And that's what I was going to ask you. My next question. So your job was to defend these perverts.
Essentially, that's what you're doing. Yes.
And
you're keeping the secret.
You're keeping the secret and making the secret go away?
Mm-hmm.
And how was that done?
It's done by sending the guy to a treatment facility and then cycling them back either to the monastery or cycling them back to a longer term holding facility or cycling them back worse into different types of ministry that they thought where they wouldn't offend. So this is so if they knew they had a guy that was sexually attracted to a phebophile, sexually attracted to a post-pubescent minor female, then they would make him a prison chaplain. Because none of that can happen in prison because it's too confined, and they would be all above the age of majority, right? So they think they can just make it go away, or they would assign them to be a hospital chaplain because there's just limited amount of interaction
With the young people that the hospital chaplains are going to visit.
Yep.
So the church, and at this time, obviously, it's the Catholic Church, but we know that this happens in all.
Every denomination has exactly, and it doesn't. It's in Judaism, it's in Islam, it's in Buddhism, and now we can say after 30 years of this litigation, pushing 40 really, that it permeates. What it comes down to is a power relationship. If somebody is put on a high pedestal and given single access without any supervision over a minor, bad people are going to want to get to that position.
100%. That's the same thing. I talk about that a lot, about like coaches and teachers. And people are like, how come there's so many perverts, and especially in our schools? It's because perverts who prey on children, they need access to children. So they will seek out positions of power in a place where they can gain access to children. It's bottom line. It's all about access. They need access to our children.
That's the number one thing. And what a better job than being a Roman Catholic priest in a parish that has a school, because you've got 7 days a week access to school under the color of doing your job. I mean, it's truly white collar crime that way.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I have to ask the question that I'm confident everybody's thinking. Why does it seem like there's so many Catholic priests that were molesters? Like O'Grady's and O'Malley's, and they all kind of seem like they might be the Irish guys. Like, what's going on there? Tell us about that.
Well, I think part of it is that if an institution is allowed to keep a secret for a really long time, then all of those cases, once they get released, it comes out in a flood. Second of all, you have to realize that the number of, within Irish culture, it was a very high position to be a priest, right?
And why is that?
It's within Ireland was one of the most Catholic countries until recently in the world. And so they were exporting priests all over the world because they had so many vocations.
So a ton of people in Ireland wanted to be priests because it was prestigious in the family, right?
Right.
And then also, wasn't it an issue also about like it being a relatively impoverished country back then?
Oh yeah, especially in the 70s. I remember there being mom and dad bringing us, Kathy and I, to go to Ireland for the first times, and you wouldn't believe how the Irish punt as a currency was worth nothing, and they really had nothing. So a priest could be ordained, sent to America, and then send a bunch of money home so his parents would have money. Yeah.
And so Ireland is, what's the word you said? If they're shipping them out?
Oh, they're exporting.
Exporting, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know why I couldn't come up with that word. So the Irish are exporting these thousands of priests,
Yep.
Catholic priests, because they're Catholic, right? And they're exporting them. And let's just say they weren't sending us our best ones, were they?
They weren't. And then what would happen is you would have Irish bishops here in California who would then go back to Ireland to recruit candidates to bring over.
And was there a timing when this was crucial here in the United States? Like
Post World War II, you know, Southern California was exploding. You know, that's when the Diocese of Orange was created. That's when the Diocese of Oakland was created. That's when the Diocese of San Bernardino was created. All of that's when Fresno and Monterey were split. So there's this explosion that was happening in the population. So consequently, they're building churches. You can't really put up a church if you don't have a priest in the Roman system. So therefore, they had to go get guys.
And we got the guys from Ireland, and they gave us...
Or wherever.
We
We were getting bad guys. You look at now at the priest list right now, we were getting bad guys from the Philippines. We were getting bad guys from Mexico. You name it, we got them.
And so, and is it fair to say that they weren't sending us the cream of the crop ones?
I think that's a really strong argument. However, I think over time you can say that there is an operating percentage of perpetrators in the Roman Catholic clergy from 1950 to 2002. That's, you can say, across the world. It was a significant percentage of the clergy were perpetrators.
And do you think that that's a product of the fact that there was a culture of keeping it the secret?
Culture of secrecy. There's also a culture of clericalism, whereby, you know, the priest is alter Christus. The priest is this symbol of Christ in the world, and therefore you can't cross a priest. And if a priest falls, you have to do anything in your power to try to save him, including telling the kids to shut up.
And was that what they were asking you to do?
That's exactly what was happening. You go out and make deals. I mean, it's no different than equivalent to the parking lot exchange with your client and the Diocese of Orange folks, right? They were basically paying it. They already had a prescribed agreement. They already had the cash. They were ready and willing to buy the silence.
Yeah, for the listeners, what Patrick's referring to is the case that I had with that particular priest. There was a group of the higher ups that basically, when two young men reported that this priest was molesting them, they had them meet them in the Wix parking lot in Costa Mesa. It's no longer there. Right off the 405, like at night. Like the mob, right? They go there and they're like, "What do you want from us?" You know, I'm assuming, I don't know, did they have bags of money in the car? And these two young men who had been molested by Father Lyons were like, "We don't want anything. We just want him to stop molesting children, and we want you to make sure that doesn't happen." But it was like they were going to pay him off and to keep their silence, and that wasn't what they wanted. And
I can tell you that is the case that's happened across the country. That was normal operating policy. That's what fixers were for. That's what vicars for clergy were for. That's what vicar generals did on a normal basis. And if they were successful at it, this is the thing that's so horrifying to me from a cultural standpoint. If they were really successful at keeping that scandal under control, those are the guys that got promoted to be bishops.
Unbelievable. That's a good word. A little better than wow, right? That's unbelievable.
It's also unforgivable.
It is unforgivable. Well, there's really nothing that's unforgivable. There is. Who am I kidding?
If you believe in mercy, that's true.
I do believe in mercy. I do have a hard time because, you know, every day I talk about how I want to light these pedophiles on fire, and I do feel that way. Yeah. And then I say, please forgive me, God. But, and we're going to talk about how all of this experience has impacted your faith, because I think that's a key question for me to ask you.
It touches belief, doesn't it? And the reason it feels unbelievable is because we were never given the tools or the language or the concepts the philosophical basis to be able to understand this, because it wasn't conceivable that a Roman Catholic priest would sexually assault a minor, female or male, because they wouldn't do that.
I just want to touch on one little thing. Yeah, most people have that belief, right, Patrick? Most people believe, like, there's no way it's a priest. That goes back to my problem with my case. It's like, who's going to believe some young kid or, over a priest, right? A
nun who's willing to testify that way.
And there was a nun who was willing to testify. So my perpetrator was a priest, and their star witness was a nun. And I was like, I'm going down in flames.
They're both Irish, and they speak the brogue, and it sounds really holy and all that.
Yes. Oh,
that's bad. That's why it's so hard to convince a jury.
It is. It's not easy, and I was ready and willing to go down swinging on that, but. You were instrumental in letting me know who all these players were, which was key. It was like I had a mob board, like a board, and I put all the photos of all the people that were involved in the case. And so I want to get back to your story because I'm jumping around a little bit, but going back to how it is that these priests, there's so many perverts that are hiding behind, the cloth.
The little white tab,
Yeah, it is sickening. It's despicable. It's despicable, especially because you're preying on people's faith, and you're in the detriment and the damage, not just to the people that you're obviously the victims that you're preying on, the family members.
The entire family system gets damaged.
And it's not just the family system, and it just permeates and goes on for generations. And then more importantly, the entire world as a whole, it's diluted the faith in something that's supposed to be and is truly pure and holy. And when people think about the Catholic Church now, they think, oh, perverts. People will think that, and that's a crying shame that they're using their position of something that's supposed to be, pure and holy, and to perpetrate crimes upon children, and destroying families, and destroying communities, and destroying people's faith. And that to me is there's a really nice place in hell for those people. I'm guessing it's going to be very hot there for them, but. That's between them and God, not me or us. However, do you believe that perverts who want to prey on children are actually going into that profession or have gone into that profession because not just the access, but then let's just say they are attracted to little boys? Mm-hmm. Right, because we see that quite a bit with the priests that have been civilly sued.
The different clerical perpetrators have very specific target populations that they go after, and they don't touch anybody else.
And it's generally speaking young boys.
No, it comes down to whatever their proclivities are. The most underreported crime are the sexual crimes against young females, because they're the ones who carry the greatest shame and speak up the least. The second most are the teenager ephebophile young girls, because again, it's shame, right? And so it's really hard essentially we're trying to prove a negative, aren't we? We're trying to, even though we now know that there are 7,400 Catholic priests that are credibly accused of being perpetrators in the United States from 1950 to the present. So we know
7,400?
Over, yeah.
Wow. Incredible.
I know, and all of that's come out in these years of litigation is that we've plugged along through. So we're basically proving a negative, because the majority of people will never come forward. They will never tell their secret, and that's fine. Whatever brings them healing is what we need to do. But it doesn't it doesn't help the future generations. And I'm really thankful for every survivor who's ever come forward to say anything at all, because you're going to help the future generations.
Amen. Amen. I just wrote a book, and it's called Defeating the Darkness. And it's about survivor stories of people who had the courage to come forward. And I think that's like their greatest superpower, is that they've been able to help it to stop happening.
That's it.
And that's like really, it's kind of a call to action for that very thing that you're touching upon right now, Patrick. It's about, let's just go through the fire and stand up against this evil so that you can make a difference for future generations, even if it's outside the statute of limitations.
Exactly.
For your case, if you report it, some other victim down the road who gets abused needs your help. Not only to let people know, like, that guy's a pervert, but when they do report it, it's like, oh, wait a minute, somebody else reported this too. It's corroboration.
You bring up, I think, one of the most important points, that those who are not trained in the legal world, we need other survivors to come forward, because that's where we get notice from. That's where we get the pattern and practice evidence that we do to prove that this guy, usually it's a guy, did it to this kid. Because they did it exactly the same way, in the same stages of grooming, in the same kind of conduct, and in the same time. This is when they stopped. Why did they stop? Because they were no longer in the target population. So we can prove that whole pattern and practice, because now we've interviewed 10, 12 different people who don't know one another, that have the intimate, exact same knowledge on how this perpetrator operates. We take that body, we were able to tell that story to the jury, and they look at this kid over here and go, oh yeah, he did it.
100%. That's exactly.
And that's the real motivation for a survivor to come forward.
I agree. And it helps it really does bring healing to their own soul. You know, it did in my case, and I've seen hundreds of people that, like, as soon as they're able to actually open up and come forward and tell people, yeah, this happened to me too. You know, it's hard the first time you tell somebody that, because you don't want to be branded like, oh, you're a, victim. But it's not being a victim, it's a survivor. You survived this, and you're going to keep on surviving whatever, the Lord brings you next.
And I think we should also tell the viewers too, and the listeners, that they know that there are different stages of coming forward. So they can come forward to us in a confidential forum, right? And tell us about the pattern and practice. They don't necessarily have to sign a statement under oath, right? They don't necessarily have to do a TV interview, right? They don't necessarily have to do all of those public things, but by coming forward to an authority who can use that information, they provide a nice data set that is eventually used to be able to prove all of these cases. So, because there are a number of people that they don't mind talking to you private, because it's confidential as a lawyer and as a former prosecutor, but they're not necessarily ready to go on a speaking tour.
100%.
That's scary.
Oh, yeah. Well, and they don't have to. That's the reality.
Yeah, but we have to say that.
Yeah, they can be listed as, you're right. For anyone who's even listening and thinking about reporting it, you can be listed as a Jane Doe or a John Doe. And there are a lot of measures in place to keep your identity secret. And it's a really hard decision, but I can assure you from my experience, I have seen nothing but therapeutic value in doing so. And also it really does help a greater cause of stopping this from happening to other people. And that's really what we want to do, is make the world a better place so these perpetrators get stopped in their tracks and stop destroying our children, who turn out to be, adults and parents who have a lot of lifelong problems. And I mean, the wreckage and the damage that's left behind from sexual abuse is astronomical. From addictions to just behavioral issues, psychological issues, anxiety, depression. There's physical ailments. There's a whole host of things that come from that. And the path to healing is really to get all of that out and talk about it and do something, use it for good, and try to make a change in the world. And I think that's To me, that's the best way I've seen people heal. So
I eventually want to talk a little bit about some different healing modalities, but one thing I wanted to touch on, we just kind of flashed over it a second, was it does crush a lot of belief systems, right? And so it's human nature to say, if this part is rotten, then all of it is rotten, you know? But the criminal acts done within a faith system doesn't necessarily mean the faith system is completely broken. You can have terrible examples of Judaism or Catholicism or Islam, but that doesn't mean that religious system, Buddhism, is completely broken. It's just that means you've got criminal actors wearing the cloth in that system that need to be dismantled and sent away.
100%. Yeah, that's a great point, because I'm confident, going back to your story, your original story, about how you're basically now placed in a position in the church. Here you are thinking you're going to be, coaching football or teaching young people about the Lord, and you're in a place where you're a defense attorney for a bunch of perverts, and your job is to basically be the cleaner and cover it up. And at some point, obviously, because now we're talking about it, you're not keeping that secret. Was there a moment in your life where you just thought, I can't do this anymore?
There were a couple different moments. One, I remember sitting with some friends and his entire family on the porch at St. Mary's in Stillwater, the last parish I was ever at. And then I also remember a meeting with my former abbot, who turned out was a perpetrator himself, Timothy Kelly, and he was going to send me. Wait,
the guy who sent you to go be the cleaner was a pervert himself?
What the first abbot, as far as I know, was not. Jerome Tyson was not. The guy that was elected to replace him was, with multiple cases against him. And, well, it's no different. I mean, Cardinal McCarrick, we've had multiple bishops. We've had 4 auxiliary bishops in LA that were perpetrators. I mean, so it's not, it's permeated through the entire system all the way to the
tree's bad.
Yeah, tree's bad. And
unbelievable.
But I distinctly remember that meeting with Abbot Timothy, that he was telling me I was going to the Bahamas. And the Bahamas in our system was where you warehouse bad guys, because you got them outside the jurisdiction, and they basically sat there and did nothing.
They would ship off the pervert priest to the Bahamas?
Yep.
Unbelievable.
St. Augustine's in the Bahamas. And so, that was a crucial meeting. That to me, it forced me to make a decision. So, and I'm thankful for it in retrospect, because I can't imagine still living that particular life.
How old were you at that point?
I'm 33 and a half, I think, at that point.
So you're 33 and a half. Your whole entire college education, everything you've done has been to be a priest and a monk.
Yeah.
And when you had that come to Jesus moment where you were like, I can't do this anymore.
It's an unbelievable moment, because you're at this existential point where you have to completely detach. If you're going to live an authentic, human, Christian life, you're going to have to detach from everything, let it all go. You got to walk away. And when you walk away from a religious life, you don't have anything.
Yeah, tell me about that. It's not. This is not like me quitting my job at the DA's office and going to work for the city attorney, or going to work. You're a priest and a monk. The only place to be a priest and a monk is in a church.
You can never be employed ever again in that role, right? And you can never. And you're not saving for anything, because you don't have a retirement.
Did you?
Built
Yeah,
up.
I was going to ask that.
You have a checking account, and you're given $100 a month for spending money, because everything is taken care of, right? I mean, you live a pretty glorified life. You're given a good place to live. You're given 3 squares a day. You have a nice place to sleep. You're given a profession of respect, but but you got to let it all go.
And so you don't get paid a salary per se. You get a stipend
No.
of $100 a month.
Yeah, because all the money from goes back to the monastery.
So you don't have a savings account with
No,
money.
nope.
Did you have a driver's license?
I had a driver's license. Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
no savings, no retirement.
No credit rating because you don't own anything.
Right, so you can't even. I mean, for $100 a month, I can't imagine you're getting too many credit cards
No,
either.
you don't have a credit card because you don't need a credit card.
Everything like toiletries and stuff were provided for you,
Oh yeah, everything's provided.
and food and a place to live. And what about like social stuff?
Oh, at that point you're cut off because all of you work a different lifestyle, right? Because you work every weekend. You're really on from, beginning on Fridays when you're doing, wedding rehearsals or all kinds of things. You're on all weekend. So you don't, your friends are also in the profession.
So, right, they're all other priests, right?
Yeah.
Or priests or perverts. Okay, so
And at this point, your friend group has to disown you because you've defected.
and you're not keeping the secrets.
Exactly.
Okay, we got to talk about that too. But this whole secrecy amongst the other priests.
Oh yeah, they know.
They know what's going on, right?
Yeah, they do.
They know who's molesting who.
Well, they know limited amounts, because only the people really in the chancery office of the diocese or in the core leadership of the monastery really know. It's all centralized into just a few people. And that was my experience no matter where I went. So that's why it was really easy in our case that we didn't need to depose a whole bunch of people. We didn't need to put 17 people on the stand. We really only need to put 3 or 4 key people on the stand, and we were going to be able to prove that case. That's because the secrecy circle is so tight.
Okay, but when you're saying prove the case, weren't you defending the perverts?
No, I was speaking of Dennis Lyons.
Got you.
So I'm transferring that learned
I
experience
see.
to our real case.
I
And
see.
it doesn't matter if you're working in a bankruptcy court. I testified in a bankruptcy court on a case, or if you're testifying in a criminal or in a civil court. It's really just a small group of people
Okay.
that are in the know.
So, as far as a prosecutor being able to prove it up, there's the higher ups that are all in the know. So there's a few of those people that know it, right?
Yep.
So what about how is it when you? I guess my question to you is, when priests are aware that another priest is molesting a kid, why don't they tell?
I can't answer that question because I don't understand. Now, sometimes they're going to say that I learned about it in confession. So they're going to play off the priest penitent privilege malarkey.
Right? Because
Very few times you
that's a
do
way
learn.
to keep the secret, right?
You do learn that way. Yeah. And it's a way to cover up what you know.
Is to say you learned about it in confession.
You learned about it in confession. But if you learn about it from parishioners,
There's no priest
Right.
penance. What's it called?
priest penitent privilege. But here's that secrecy. What we see though in looking at the secret archives of all of these different dioceses across the country, guys would write letters and report directly that this is what's going on. And then they thought that fulfilled their commitment. And then what would the chancery do? Shut it down.
Shut it down and keep. So the higher ups would keep it a secret, even if it had been reported. Okay, let me ask you this: did you have to take a vow of celibacy?
Oh, sure.
And do priests keep that vow?
Are you kidding? No. At any point in time, the research is really clear. It was consistent with my experience that 50% of the clergy are not celibate at any moment in time, of the Roman clergy. It's not, I can say as an older guy now, it's not consistent with human nature. It's an unrealistic expectation that Roman clergy are going to be celibate.
I agree. That's why I was in the Episcopal Church growing up, because they were allowed to marry and
Right.
fornicate. Okay, but not that I was a priest, so it didn't affect me. But do you think that there's a part of that, the fact that the priests maybe have a girlfriend or
The scandal factor, yeah. Because what we have seen consistently is that perpetrators will turn on the system if they think they're going to get turned in, then they will spill on everything that they know. Yep. And they will use that as coercive power in order to work out a deal.
So I always imagine, when we've talked before, that the priest, so that if there's priests who's, basically indulging in their natural urges to have sex. So let's say they have a girlfriend.
Sure.
And the pervert priest who's molesting little kids knows, hey, Father so-and-so has a girlfriend, that if Father so-and-so goes and rats out the pervert, that the pervert's going to rat him out for actually having a girlfriend.
That's exactly right.
So it's like, it's just a dirty web of secrets.
Yep. It's a circle of secrecy. Yep.
Interesting.
That they have to maintain. And there's also a percentage of people that specifically don't want to know. And so they just absolutely bury their heads, which is not consistent with the gospel message, right? It's not being a good pastor. It's not good in the long run, but it serves their political purposes, which is to ultimately, it's selfish, serve themselves.
Serve themselves. It's quite despicable, actually. Ugh. So going back to you, so you make this decision, like, I cannot do this anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And when you do that, like, is there a formal procedure for which you are no longer a priest or a monk?
Sure. Then I remember
laicization, it's called.
Laicization, yeah. And I remember going to the abbot, and it was Timothy Kelly, the perpetrator, and he says, John Paul II will never allow this, right? He said the practice is that nobody before the age of 40 will ever be allowed to be laicized. And I said, Timothy, don't you remember that you sent me to school to be trained by the canonists who are working for the Holy See on this exact same issue? I know what the practice is. And so, I applied in December or January of 98 and was granted by July of 98 because the judges working on the cases were my professors. I knew all those guys. And so it's really a simple procedure if you're going to be straight and honest in going through, but that's not how ultimately the system works. It's not. This is all about image, bella figura. It's all about keeping things looking perfect.
So did you have to give a reason why you were leaving?
Oh, sure. I want to get married and have kids.
That's a good as reason as ever, right? And
yeah,
they were
that celibacy is not viable.
And they let you out.
Yep.
And so you get laicized, and gosh, I want to hear the rest of the story about what happens next. But we're out of time for right now, so I'm going to have to bring you back for the next episode, because I'm confident that our listeners are like, "What happened next? What are you doing now?" Right?
The path a lot of other priests have gone. Yep.
This is fascinating. Wow. I said it again. See, I can't.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. It's so interesting, and I can't wait to hear what happens next. So we're going to have to wait till our next episode to hear what happens next with Patrick Wall, the former Catholic priest and monk who took a stand and decided, I cannot do this anymore, and be the cleaner up for the Catholic Church and all of the despicable acts that the perverts were perpetrating upon our children. So we're going to hear what he does with his amazing life after this decision to leave the church on the next episode of Defeating the Darkness. Until next time, if you can't find the light, be the light. See you next time.
Be the light, shine so bright.